The wisdom of Kabbalah, we learn these Bible stories from an internal perspective, meaning that all these seeming characters, events, objects, places, animals, plants, everything that seemingly we see with our external eyes as appearing outside of us in corporeal forms, in the wisdom of Kabbalah we interpret those as referring to internal processes, structures taking place at the level of our internality, of our desires and thoughts, and that they're not things that happened in the past as if historically or even imaginarily, but they're relevant right now in this current, present moment as we undergo an inner journey, a spiritual journey toward a future final goal. And that all these stories were written by Kabbalists, meaning by people who received. Kabbalah comes from the word reception. It means reception in Hebrew. So people who are Kabbalists are those who have spiritual attainment or reception of the spiritual upper forces that they have attained. And that's what they're writing about. They're writing about this inner picture which depicts this inner spiritual journey that we undergo in our present moment, right now, in our desires and in our thoughts. And that's what this story talks about. That's what other stories we look at talk about from the Bible or from the Torah, the Pentateuch. And we're going to get into that today, the inner spiritual meaning of the binding of Isaac. My name is Markos, and this is Kabbalah Explained Simply, and we're just going to get into it after this little opener. So, without further ado, we'll just speak a little bit more about this concept we just mentioned, how all these Bible stories or stories of the Torah, they describe internal forces, processes, structures, everything we experience on our spiritual journey, in our desires, in our thoughts, in our intentions. So we take a story such as the binding of Isaac, or all these Bible stories, or as we say, the stories of the Torah. This is a book that, when we understand it from a Kabbalistic perspective, we understand that this was a book that was written from those who had perception in the spiritual world. The spiritual world is a world which is opposite to and above our current corporeal world. Our current corporeal world is defined as the world that we perceive in our five senses: sight, smell, touch, hearing, and taste. And the spiritual world is that which we perceive in a new sense, an additional sense that we attain, not a sense that we were born with. It's not a sense that we might think of in terms of intuition or anything like that, but it's a sense that we attain when we try to reach a spiritual goal. What's a spiritual goal? As we see up here, it's a goal that it is eternal, whole, perfect. Again, if we think of our world, it's marked by transient, it's marked by pleasures that are fleeting, that come and go. The spiritual goal is marked by those opposites, by pleasure that is eternal, ongoing, doesn't fade away when we attain it, but it rather increases and constantly expands. And it's all felt in an opposite vessel to what we currently feel in our reality. All of our senses, our five senses, they're receptors. We're constantly receiving information. We're aiming to receive pleasure all the time in our corporeal world, in this world. Whereas a spiritual world, that new sense that we develop in attaining spirituality, is a sense that feels flavor in bestowing, in giving. It's an altruistic quality which is similar in form, which is in resemblance with or in adhesion with that very force of bestowal, which has a few names. Kabbalists gave it a few names. You hear about it called God, you hear about it called nature, you hear about it called the Creator. God and nature are synonymous in their meaning and also in their numerical value, in what's called gematria. They both share the numerical value 86, because Kabbalists point to the fact that when you're speaking of God or you're speaking of nature, you're speaking about the same thing. You're speaking about a force of bestowal, a force of love, bestowal, and connection, which created and sustains reality, and which created us in order to ultimately come to resemblance with that force, to attain that force in our perception, in our sensation, upon our entire corporeal sense of reality that we were born into. And it's a force that's also called the Creator. Creator too, it comes from two words in Hebrew. The word for creator in Hebrew is boreh, and it comes from two words, bo and re, which mean come and see. meaning that the Creator isn't some abstract entity or something that we do not attain, but rather it comes from our attainment. It comes from coming and seeing. It comes from through our attainment of the Creator, we come to know the Creator, meaning through our attainment of that force of love and bestowal, we come to know it. And that defines the two parameters of our spiritual journey: our goal, which is that very force of love, bestowal, and connection, which we can come into attainment of that force. And when we come into attainment of that force, we reach an eternal and perfect reality, an eternal and perfect sense of pleasure. We come to realize the purpose for which that force created us, which is a purpose of reaching an eternal, complete form of pleasure. As we say, the wisdom of Kabbalah comes from reception. It's all about how to receive the pleasure that the Creator, that nature, that God, which is one and the same, which is a force of love, bestowal, and connection, which this force wants to impart upon us, wants us to feel, and learning how to receive the pleasure. That we cannot receive that pleasure in our inborn corporeal vessels, in our inborn corporeal senses, meaning we can see from our lives we're always trying to move toward pleasure, move away from pain, but each time we attain a pleasure, it's like sand going through our fingers. We can't hold on to it because our desire, our corporeal nature, is made such that if we receive pleasure inwardly for personal benefit alone, we simply cannot hold on to it. It dissipates, it disappears, it quenches, it becomes extinguished. So in order to properly receive the pleasure that's always being imparted upon us in its eternal, perfect form, that doesn't go through any special filterings before it extinguishes, as we just said. So we need to acquire that new sense, the sense which is above our current corporeal senses, or as we say, above our egoistic perception of reality. Egoistic meaning that we wish to receive pleasure for our personal benefit alone, also at the expense of everything outside of us, at the expense of others, trying to draw into this space where everything disappears and dissipates all the time. So we build a sense above that, which is a sense of bestowal, which is one which is equal, what's called equal in form with the Creator, equal in form with that force called God, nature, Creator, the force of love and bestowal which created everything, which precedes everything, and which is beyond all of our current corporeal senses. So texts such as the Bible as we know it, or the Torah, Kabbalistic texts, they were written from that perception, and it's a perception that's through a sense that's above our corporeal senses. So even though we seemingly read these texts as containing all kinds of corporeal words, as we said, places, people, it might seem like it happened in history, it might seem like it happens in an imaginary place where even our wildest imagination is still within our five senses, because even our wildest imagination, we still think of it in terms of some objects or people or places, or some kind of form that is assumed by the five senses. So that's still within our imagination. So these texts do not speak about anything that our five senses can grasp. It doesn't speak about anything that we can put together as some kind of corporeal picture with our corporeal minds and how we perceive with our corporeal five senses. No, rather they talk about reality that we attain by undergoing an inner exploration, an inner introspection and discovery of that source force of nature called God, nature, the Creator, and its attainment, and all kinds of scrutinies we undergo, confusions, doubts, clarifications, resolutions of those doubts, all kinds of processes at the level of our desires and thoughts and our intentions upon our desires in order to attain that new sense, which is ultimately a new intention that aims to bestow outwardly. And that's what these texts talk about. And they use these corporeal names. It's what's called the language of branches. Kabbalists call it the language of branches, that our corporeal world is the branch reality. It's where everything comes into this corporeal vision, corporeal forms. And then there's the root reality, the language of roots, the world of roots, which is the spiritual world. It's our world of causes, whereas our world is a world of consequences or effects. And so they use the language of branches for each root to point to its corporeal branch, but ultimately, Kabbalists in these books, such as the Torah and other Kabbalistic texts, they're speaking about inner structures, processes that we're undergoing in our present moment as we aim to attain this ultimate goal of eternity and perfection, which is called coming into equivalence of form with the Creator, or coming into adhesion with the Creator, or you could say it's called coming into balance with nature, attaining that same equivalent intention that nature has towards us from ourselves outwardly, which is called acquiring that spiritual sense. And there's many processes involved in this, because really it's all about flipping our perception of reality to its opposite, from our egoistic inborn nature and perception and sensation of reality, which is all about receiving inwardly, self-serving for myself, and flipping that to its altruistic opposite. Just a couple of quotes before we get into it about this principle, about how the Torah and Kabbalistic texts speak about the spiritual world. So this story in the Torah is the clothing of the Torah. Yeah, just like we said, it's the language of branches. It's like the branch to the roots. Or here it says it's the clothing of the Torah. Whoever thinks that that clothing is the actual Torah, and that there is nothing else within it, will be cursed, and he will have no share in the next world. Yeah, cursed meaning that that they will die along with everything that dies in this corporeal world, because nothing in the corporeal world has that connection to it, the eternal life. So that's considered being cursed. That just like we see everything in our lives eventually perish and fade away, just like every pleasure we receive for our own personal benefit, as we said, it's like sand falling through our fingers. We can't hold on to it. So that's considered cursed in the wisdom of Kabbalah. That it doesn't make that connection to its spiritual root. It doesn't make that connection to eternity, and we never truly feel what true pleasure and happiness is available to us by attaining that connection with the eternal reality. So we'll be cursed, and he will have no share in the next world, in that spiritual world, as we saw. This is why David said, "Open my eyes that I may behold wondrous things from your law," from your Torah, observing what is beneath the clothing of the Torah. That's from the book of Zohar with the Sulam commentary. There's also another quote here by Kabbalist Judah Ashlag, Bala Sulam, the greatest, most renowned Kabbalist of the last century, who is the source for much of what we learn. So he writes in his introduction to the study of the 10 Sefirot that there is a strict condition during the engagement in this wisdom to not materialize the matters with imaginary and corporeal issues. Yeah. He says it's strict. You don't form pictures in your head that this is some history or some story in our imagination, that it connects to corporeal people, corporeal places, corporeal objects. He's saying don't do that. Don't materialize the matters with imaginary and corporeal issues. This is because thus they breach, "Thou shalt not make unto thee a graven image, nor any manner of likeness." In that event, one is rather harmed. We explained what it means to be cursed or harmed before, that we remain within this world, and ultimately it's a world where everything perishes. So we're in that realm of you could say, death, when we don't connect to what true life is, eternal life. So in that event, one is rather harmed instead of receiving benefit, instead of receiving the spiritual benefit. So let's get into the story already. It begins... This is the binding of Isaac story. It's the Genesis 22:1. So it begins like this. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham, here I am." Here I am, Abraham replied. He replied. So firstly, we start with this concept of God talking to Abraham. Yeah. What is this God talking to Abraham? In our world, if we hear about God talking to someone, if someone comes up to you and says, "Yeah, God told me today this and that," we often consider them to be quite delusional. We don't think of it as something serious. So here at the very outset, it's got God talking to Abraham. So what is this talking about? As we mentioned earlier, that God means nature, and we said that the numerical value, if you can see it there, for Elohim, which is God in Hebrew, is the same numerical value as Hateva, which means nature. You can see here how the values add up to 86. So what we're talking about is, a person, if we think about it this way, that a person in their lives, how they end up coming to spirituality, we develop through all these desires, might have seen this before if you've been watching our channel, that we develop through desires for, smaller desires, individual desires for food, sex, family, shelter, which are called the still level of desire, and we evolve into social desires for money, bigger desires for honor, control, knowledge. So we have to go through all these desires and trying to satiate them. Each time, each new evolution in humanity is when we cross through some threshold of this desire in one place or another. And our era is characterized by this desire for spirituality popping up, also in an individual, that once we feel that we have satiated more or less all these other desires and that there's nothing more to achieve through them, that we don't have any new special knowledge to aspire for, or even though we might still feel pleasure from control, honor, fame, respect, and money, and food, sex, family, and shelter, even though we can still feel pleasure from these things because it's our innate desire to feel pleasure, and corporeally that's how we receive pleasure, through all these filters. Nevertheless, when we have that desire for spirituality, when that emerges, which we call the point in the heart, it's often drawn in this way. So what's this point in the heart? It's the question about the meaning and purpose of life, when we're asking, what is the meaning of our lives? Why are we here? Where did we come from? Where are we really now? Where are we headed? What is real? What's reality? When we're plagued by these existential questions and we're finding that they are interesting us more than all the pleasures on these levels, it's considered that our desire for spirituality is rather active, it's rather rampant. It's pushing us into all kinds of searches, spiritual searches. We might look through all kinds of media about philosophy and science when we're ultimately looking for answers to these spiritual questions, to these existential questions. We might be looking through all kinds of books and teachings. We might join all kinds of groups. We might try all kinds of techniques. We might go through things like meditation, yoga, or really immerse ourselves in even trying to work out all kinds of secret things happening in the world. We might immerse ourselves in all kinds of conspiracies and things, or go in a direction of self-help. There's many different ways people try to relate to all this existential questioning that comes up. People might go into esoteric teachings and mysticism. Others might go into religion and try different religions and sub-religions and sects and things like that. Eventually, this point in the heart, if we're truly asking about life's meaning and purpose and nothing we're coming across is fulfilling us, we start embarking on the method of Kabbalah. So the method of Kabbalah is already the method of how to attain that spiritual equivalence of form with the Creator, or that balance with nature, that attaining that quality or force of love, bestowal, and connection as that additional sense above our inborn senses. So when we're embarking on that journey, it's called that we're assuming the method of Kabbalah upon ourselves. We're working on it to try to attain that quality, and we're working with the means at our disposal in order to do that. So when we're doing that, this point in the heart, we can consider that the point of Abraham within us. Abraham is a quality of mercy, or a Sefirah. It represents the Sefirah of Chesed in the wisdom of Kabbalah, which Chesed translates to mercy. It's the closest quality to the Creator. So that point is pushing us forward. It's bringing us closer to the Creator, and it's making us undergo all these scrutinies beyond all these corporeal levels of desire. And if we're following this point of Abraham, we're following this quality of mercy, we're following this quality which is bringing us closer to the Creator, that quality of bestowal. So it's as if we're marching along in our spiritual search, in our spiritual journey with this thing. That's what it's called, that God is speaking to Abraham, right? It means that there is this force that's behind all of this development, all of this evolution, and it's ultimately leading us to the purpose of creation. We could say that the purpose at this level of desire, food, sex, family, shelter, the still level of desire, it's to preserve form in humans, it's to preserve the human species, just like in rocks, the still level of inanimate matter. rocks and everything you can perceive as inanimate matter. You have this force that's just working to preserve the form of these objects. And then when you go to the purpose at the level of money, that's growth in human society. It's growth as a society, all kinds of exchange, bringing upon all kinds of connections. Just like in plants, the vegetative level of desire, this is called the desire for money, where the purpose is growth. The next level of desire has its purpose as more freedom of movement, more moving around, more just like animals. The animate level of desire can move from place to place, as opposed to plants, which can only grow in one place. And then finally, the desire for spirituality, it's called the human level of desire, or the speaking level of desire. So the human level of desire is actually its purpose is the purpose of creation, which we learn as to bring us to truly feel enjoyment, and by truly enjoying, through acquiring adhesion with the Creator, balance with nature, acquiring similarity in form with the Creator's form, with nature's form, with God's form, however you want to call it, of love, bestowal, and connection, that we attain that upon our inborn desire to receive pleasure, which is opposite in form with the Creator. So when we attain that, we achieve the purpose of creation. And so when we're feeling this spiritual desire emerging in us, all these existential questions, when we're asking ultimately what is the meaning of life, even if we're not verbalizing it that way, but when we're feeling this, some kind of dissatisfaction, some kind of empty space around all these other desires at this level, so that's a calling. You could say it's like Abraham's calling, God calling Abraham. That's what's actually happening here. It's this, we can feel it at the level of desires. It's not something, some abstract, hearing some voices in my head or anything like that, but rather it's this force that's working in a person to attract them to this something unknown, something outside of all these corporeal desires, where in the beginning we don't really know what that is, but ultimately it's that same force of bestowal that's pulling us towards it. That's what it's called, God talking to Abraham. So we said before, Abraham equals chesed. We know it as a sefirah also in Kabbalah. We'll talk about that later. It's a quality of mercy, or as we say, a quality of bestowal. The spiritual quality. Spirituality is equivalent to bestowal, just so we're not confused. That when we're talking about spirituality in the wisdom of Kabbalah, you can think of it as bestowal. What does it mean, bestowal? That it's this outward mode of giving, altruism, where there's no thought contained for my own personal benefit, but where the thought and intention, it's all aimed for the benefit of everything outside of me. You could say for other people, others, and for just this outwardly directed mode. And that's the Creator's quality towards us, just this force of bestowal that only wishes for the best for that creation that it created, for this desire to receive that it created, to give it enjoyment. And it's a constant force working in that direction. So that's considered spirituality, when we attain that same force that's working on us all the time, back outwardly toward it. Continuing the story, the binding of Isaac. Then God said, take your son, God said to Abraham, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. So this is where, again, it seems very, very brutal and cold, as we said earlier. That how could God seemingly tell Abraham to kill his own son, to lead him on this journey, and to make efforts as well, not just to kill him on the spot, but to go to another region, to take him with you to the region of Moriah, and then not just kill him in any kind of way, but make him as a burnt offering on a mountain that I will show you, meaning to even climb up a mountain. It's a huge journey that God's telling Abraham to go on. In order to do what? In order to go on all this journey with his son and everything that he needs to take with him, to kill his son, to sacrifice him for God. So as we said, at face value, it just sounds completely brutal, completely cold, just like that this isn't an all-loving, all-bestowing God, but as if it's like some kind of devil or something, right? But again, that's only if we're looking at it from an external perspective. Here, what's happening is, if we look at, again, if we've satiated all these desires here, and we're advancing now in spirituality. So now we're feeling this quality of Abraham and God talking to it. We already defined what that is, that we're feeling dissatisfaction, some kind of dissatisfaction with all these worldly pleasures, and we're moving in a spiritual direction. We want to come closer to the Creator. That's called God talking to Abraham, that we're feeling some kind of desire that's working on us to move in this direction of bestowal and coming closer to the Creator. That force of Abraham's working on us, this point in the heart, this desire for spirituality. So then, when this is happening, then God said, take your son. So all of a sudden, this other quality appears in us, right? So now if we're moving in this inner spiritual direction towards our purpose, moving in a mode of bestowal, Abraham wanting only to reach spirituality, to reach bestowal with the Creator, all of a sudden Isaac appears. What's Isaac? Isaac is this opposite quality. So what happens here is we're introduced to this, what's called spiritual progress. For the time being, it's in 2 lines. We'll learn how spiritual progress in 3 lines soon. But it represents 2 fundamental aspects of our spiritual progress, that we always start in spirituality by moving along that very line that we were talking about, that Abraham, that desire for spirituality. It's called the right line, that quality of chesed, quality of bestowal. Ultimately, it's the feeling of an importance of spirituality, an importance of bestowal, that we feel this quality as being important and something worth investing our lives into it, investing ourselves into, putting ourselves into doing all kinds of things, to thinking in kinds of ways where we try to equalize our intention with that of the Creator. Bestowal, the very status of the Creator, that status of a quality of bestowal and love just seems much greater than everything egoistic in the world, that all the materialism, individualism, all this competition within materialism and individualism in our lives, everything where people are aiming to become more and more wealthy, more and more respected in society, gain more and more power and control. That seems as something very small in comparison, something transient, something that's destined to die very soon, and that doesn't have any real eternal worth to it. Whereas the desire for spirituality, that desire to bestow, bestowal becomes important. That Abraham leading us along is very important. So that's the first stage that comes about. And when we're heading on this path, when we're really trying to move ahead in that mode of bestowal, we encounter Isaac. What's Isaac? It's the opposite. It's called the left line. In the Sefirot, or the qualities, we learn it as the Sefirah of Gvura. And ultimately, it's the recognition of evil. So we try to move forward in bestowal. We try to be more loving, more bestowing, more giving. We try to immerse ourselves in that altruistic quality of the Creator. We want to reach the purpose of creation, which is adhesion with the Creator. But we can't just go on that line of bestowal alone, because our nature is the opposite. We are born as a desire to receive pleasure for personal benefit alone. That egoistic intention is planted in us from our very birth, and it grows with us, and it's always there with us. So this quality of Isaac represents our ultimate human nature, which is egoism, which wants to receive for personal benefit alone, which wants to receive for from everything outside of me for myself. So we started going in that spiritual direction. We have that importance of bestowal. That's the desire for spirituality activated. That's Abraham, as we said, God talking to Abraham, moving ahead. And then through that development, we reach this recognition of evil, the recognition of our egoistic nature as being opposite to this spiritual goal that we want to meet. So then what do we feel from this? We feel that we want to destroy this quality, right? Because we perceive that this egoism is opposite to the spirituality, opposite to the Creator, opposite to bestowal. It's not letting us reach that goal. And so the initial instinct is, okay, if there's this egoism inside me which is disturbing and distracting me from reaching spirituality, the first instinct is to kill it, to sacrifice it. I want to do away with it. I want to remove egoism completely. We see that there's many techniques in the world as well that understand, that acknowledge that the desire to receive pleasure is something harmful. It brings upon all the harm and problems and crises in the world. At the end of the day, if we look into our nature, that it's precisely that egoistic quality of wanting to receive too much for my personal benefit that turns a desire for money into a desire for greed, and which makes us exploitative, manipulative, abusive, and which brings about myriad problems in our world, in our society, on all scales, personal, social, even ecologically, how much we have waste and pollution as a result of this, etc., etc. So we recognize that there's this problem in our egoistic nature. And one of the ways that we initially think to deal with it, once we really feel like we want to move ahead spiritually, is that, okay, I don't want to deal with this egoistic nature, I just want to kill it, right? So that's where we're at the moment, where we're feeling this recognition of evil, this quality of Isaac emerging after trying to move forward in a mode of bestowal. Then what happens? Early in the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey, while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there, in a thicket, he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." The angel of the Lord called out to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, "I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me." Okay, so we're at this picture, where we said that we're moving along. We felt that force of Abraham, getting that inspiration from, as we said, God talking to Abraham, which is us feeling this importance of spirituality in our lives, meaning that we feel dissatisfaction, some kind of emptiness with all of our previous levels of desire, with all of our corporeal desires, and we're moving ahead in this importance of bestowal. Then we encounter Isaac. We encounter the left line, what's called the recognition of evil in our egoistic nature, that there is this quality within us that we're made of, our human nature of egoism, that is opposite to that of bestowal, opposite to spirituality, and with it we cannot reach spirituality. That's how we seemingly think in the beginning, and that we just want to destroy it, to slay it as an offering in order to reach spirituality, in order to reach that connection with God, nature, the Creator. Then what happens? We encounter, before we reach the middle line, then what happens? We, as it says, we bind. What ends up happening is that we bind that quality of Isaac. So he's still bound, that his son there, but he doesn't kill him. So what does this mean, that we bind Isaac but do not kill him? So that's actually the correct, again, we're not talking about corporeal people or anything like this, like a father and son, because even that seems brutal, right? Binding your son to an altar instead of killing him. It sounds very extreme. So we're not talking about that at all. We're talking about the fact that we have this awakening of our egoism. We feel it's opposite to spirituality. Our initial instinct is to want to kill it, to destroy it. But we cannot, because it's our nature. So since we cannot kill our very egoism, because we can't kill our very nature, it's what we're made of, what we can do is restrict it, limit it, place it under the control of that nature of bestowal. And once it's bound, once it's tied down, meaning once the egoistic desire, the desire to receive pleasure for personal benefit alone, once that's under the reins, so to speak, of bestowal of the Creator's nature, then it can acquire what's called the correct form, meaning a form that allows bestowal to continue flourishing and developing, that quality, that desire for spirituality within us, that it allows that quality of Abraham to strengthen and grow stronger than if it had only gone in that mode of bestowal. Because ultimately we are not a desire to bestow by nature. We have no bestowal in us by nature. So if we only go in that direction of wishing to bestow and become like the Creator, following that quality of Abraham, we eventually come to realize that we have nothing to give, because there's no giving in our nature. So that revelation of evil, the revelation of our egoistic nature, is a necessary step in our spiritual progress to becoming similar to the Creator, to reaching that balance with nature, to acquiring that new sense of bestowal upon our inborn desire to receive pleasure. So we need that revelation of that egoistic quality within us as evil, not in order to destroy it, because we cannot destroy it, because it's our nature, but in order to restrict it, to bind it. That's the meaning of the binding of Isaac. That we place that quality of egoism under the control of altruism, under the control of bestowal. And by doing so, that's when we reach this third line, which is called Jacob. It's called the middle line. In the Sefirot, it's called the Sefirah of Tiferet. And that is the line that allows similarity to the Creator to take place, allows that adhesion with the Creator, allows us to attain that new sense. This middle line is that new sense that we attain. We also learn about it as the screen and reflected light, or the Masachen or Choser in the language of Kabbalah. In short, the right combination of the right and the left, of our egoistic human nature and the importance of the spiritual nature of bestowal above it, gives rise to this middle line, which is the correct balance between them, and that's what allows that similarity to take place. Meaning we cannot destroy our nature. We need our human nature. We need that quality of reception to fuel. It gives desire. It gives fuel to this desire to bestow, to actually grow bigger. And we realize that it's been created in this way for a certain specific reason, in order for us to be able to continually draw closer and closer to the Creator from our oppositeness. This is just a picture of the 10 Sefirot and where these qualities fit within it. You have the 10 Sefirot: Keter, Chochmah, Bina, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut. Abraham is the quality of Chesed, Isaac the quality of Gvura on the left, and that's on the right, Abraham, and Tiferet is that middle line, the middle one between them, which is Jacob, the new one that comes about. As it says at the end of the story, that that all the descendants, etc., come from this correct approach that Abraham developed to this quality of Isaac that emerged within him. Just some other points from this text. We have this concept of the mountain, that Abraham climbs a big mountain. Mountain in Hebrew is har, that's a word for mountain, har. It comes from the word hirhurim, connects to the same linguistic root, which literally means thoughts, doubts, confusions. So just to, again, help us picture it in an internal way, this story, So what is it that, Abraham's with the donkey and with all this equipment and taking Isaac up the mountain? It means that when we're going in our spiritual journey where we've made a decision, meaning he's going up the mountain thinking that sacrificing Isaac as his son is the best possible action. But even though we've made a certain decision, we're still going through all these scrutinies, all these doubts, all these confusions. We're clarifying things all the time. That's part of the spiritual method here. It's part of our constant introspection, constant questioning. And when we reach the top of the mountain, that's when it says when Abraham reached the peak of the mountain and put Isaac there. So that's reaching the top of all these thoughts, doubts, confusions, scrutinies that we undergo while wishing to implement that decision. And then what happens when we reach the peak of those thoughts, doubts, confusions, scrutinies? So then a new decision comes about, a new discernment, a new introspection. That comes about from precisely going up the mountain, trying to come closer to the Creator through a certain decision that we had made, to, as we said, to sacrifice, to kill our egoism. But then once we reach the top of those scrutinies, those thoughts, those doubts, those confusions, while trying to implement that previous decision, the new, more correct decision comes into place. So just like in our spiritual journey, we move ahead. We might have a certain decision for a certain stage of our development where we think, okay, doing this is going to bring me to a sincere desire and intention to bestow upon the Creator. That's going to bring me to spirituality. We might move in that direction. And then when we work with it, very scientifically, experimenting with whatever we have at our disposal in order to reach that result, we get feedback. We get some kind of feedback. We get a certain illumination that appears in us, which brings about a new decision, a new discernment. And with that new discernment, we shift direction from the top of that mountain we reached, and then we continue on further. Just another term here to help us picture this story in an internal way as it was originally intended. So there's the donkey in the story. The donkey is the word chamor in Hebrew. It comes from the word matter in Hebrew, which is chomer. So simply put, just like Abraham's taking his donkey with him everywhere he goes, it's just like us. We have our matter. Matter in our spiritual progress, or in our spiritual definition, is the desire to receive pleasure. It's not the egoistic intention upon the desire to receive pleasure yet, but it's just the desire to receive pleasure itself, meaning that defines our matter, that defines our very nature. We could say it's the matter of creation, or the substance of creation. It's what we're ultimately made of, this desire to receive pleasure. And that's one of the reasons why we can't destroy this quality, but it's something that we take with us everywhere we go. So matter before the egoistic intention, to use and to exploit others and everything around us for personal benefit, before that egoistic intention comes into place, we still have this desire to receive pleasure in its raw form, and that's called the donkey in this story. And you see it in many stories that there's always these accompanying animals everywhere we go. And also, what is this idea that in the end, when Abraham doesn't kill Isaac but takes the ram and sacrifices it instead? So again, this means that there are these animate levels of our desire that we can kill off, these beastly desires, as it's called in the wisdom of Kabbalah, that we have these animal forms or animate levels of desire, this beastly desire to receive pleasure for personal benefit alone. We can kill off certain parts of it, which is like killing the ram in the story. But the desire to receive, in and of itself, with that egoistic intention, we cannot kill it, we can only bind it. So that's the meaning of also how Abraham eventually kills the ram and not his son Isaac, because we can't kill the full desire to receive pleasure egoistically, but we can take parts of it and kill them off, sacrifice them for the Creator, in order to come closer to the Creator. And that's more or less what this lesson brings us to. We just want to say that, again, the main point of this story at the end of the day, other than seeing it as a story that represents an inner spiritual process of us coming closer and closer to the Creator, and seeing all these people, objects, events as as inner processes taking place at the level of our desires and thoughts as we wish to come closer to spirituality, which is defined as bestowal and attaining that new sense of bestowal upon our inborn desire to receive. So the main thing is that when we're moving in that direction of bestowal, moving towards more equivalence of form with nature, with the Creator, that we encounter our egoistic quality all the time. We have to understand that it's necessary to encounter it, and there's a certain way of working with it, which doesn't mean destroying it, but which means restricting it, binding it, in order to be able to further move ahead in our spiritual journey. And that one complements the other, the left line, the right line, in order to create that middle line, that new sense. And that one provides the deficiency, the desire, which fuels our progress, just like we feel, that in our egoism, that it leads us to achieve, to attain, to want. There's the passion behind the desire itself, and then also the quality of bestowal, which is the pure quality of the Creator, which just wants to give, which just wants to be pure and to love and to have that. So the correct combination between these two is all that we work on in our spiritual progress, to achieve that middle line, to achieve that balance. And it's a very unique method. And if you have any questions, we're willing to answer them. It brings us to the end here. So I'm just going to put up this live Q&A on Zoom. It's right after this session, where all your questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Just feel free to join us for an hour full of being able to answer your questions on Zoom in a very intimate setting. You can ask in the chat there. You can ask live in person, and I'll be there to answer them. And each week we have a different KabU instructor there to answer your questions. So you have the instructions here on the screen. You just go to kabuconnect.com/live and click on Zoom. And if you're not a KabU member, then after clicking on Zoom, you sign up for a free trial. Then you click Zoom, not Zoom again, and then you'll be able to go in. So that's what we have time for today. We're just going to leave you with actually a very special clip of Kabbalist Dr. Michael Laitman speaking with Oren Levy about the spiritual meaning of the Binding of Isaac. We actually haven't released this clip in English before, so you'll get to see a new clip, even though it's an old clip, of Dr. Laitman speaking about the spiritual meaning of the Binding of Isaac right now, just before we head into this live Q&A on Zoom on KabU. So it's been great being with you. This has been Kabbalah Explained Simply. I'm Markos, and we'll see you next time. And for now, enjoy this clip about the spiritual meaning of the Binding of Isaac with Dr. Laitman. What is the spiritual meaning of the Binding of Isaac? Isaac is the left line. It's the will to receive. It represents forces of reception. That is how our whole world is built, out of the will to receive. However, in order to correctly navigate the will to receive through which we can reach good, we thus need to bind it, to control it, to limit it. That is what we needed to do, and that is what Abraham did. Only seemingly there was this thought that with the binding of Isaac, that we needed to kill Isaac. We don't need to kill that inclination of the will to receive. We only need to navigate it correctly. Therefore, it's enough to bind it without killing it, and afterward to manage it in a correct manner to the goal. It's like we see that a person who wishes to progress, I want my young son to learn well and to be a good person. So I need to stimulate him. I need to awaken in him seemingly egoistic desires, that you need to be a great person, you need to be wise, you need to learn a lot and to acquire a career, etc., etc. We need these desires, these inclinations, but that they will work for the benefit of others. But without them, it's impossible to progress. Therefore, we need to only bind the will to receive and to manage it correctly and not to kill it. Are you depicting a certain process that we all need to go through? Certainly, because we're all made of the egoistic will to receive, and we only need to lessen its direction of for myself, that a person wants for the bad of others and for the good for himself. So it won't be bad for others and good for oneself. but that same desire that it will work for the good of others. So we only change its direction. We add intention, an intention to bestow upon our desire to receive. And that's what it means to limit it, to bind it.